Folks, I'll just give you a heads up. The Integrity Commissioner is still en route. Had trouble getting out of Toronto. He's on the phone with Anne Marie right now. We still have not achieved quorum. We need two more. So we have until 7 o'clock to achieve quorum. All right, I'll keep you posted. Absolutely. We haven't started our meeting yet. I can't. There's really nothing I can do.
Yeah, but it's not nice, Fred. You ain't changing my culture. You don't come here and change my culture. Right. That's inappropriate. Well, I can say whatever I want. No, you can't. Oh, it's a hate crime. Because we're bringing people here that want to change our culture.
What's his name? No, that guy.
Mr. Jamali?
Mr. Jamali, I just want to be clear that the opinions that are being shared right now are not the opinions of council, and nor any of the members of council. So I just.
How Cosmo selling his soul for political correctness and Marxism. Good job. Yeah. I was just.
Sorry, I got distracted.
All right, we have quorum in the building, and once we get everybody seated, we can call the meeting to order. Please sign in when you get to your seat. $11, $12, $13, $14, $14. Right now? Right. I'd like to call the meeting to order, please. We do have quorum, 15, including myself, is 16, and I'll ask everybody if you could please turn your devices to silent, and we'll get going. First of all, I'll ask if there are any disclosures of pecuniary interest. Any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, please let that be noted. There are no presentations tonight. Delegations, we had one delegation signed. I see you. We had one delegation that has withdrawn, Mr. Stephen Seuss, and I see Bruce, Councillor Timms.
Mr. Chairman, I would ask that council allow a delegation from Mr. Al-Jamali, Muhammad Al-Jamali. He's present with us this evening and he's prepared.
Okay.
I understand he didn't register in time, but I'd ask council to hear him.
Certainly. Madam Clerk, can you tell me what the procedure will be?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it would need 2/3.
Okay, two-thirds so I'll ask for the vote. And because it's a 2/3, could you please vote electronically? Open the vote when you're ready.
The vote is open.
And yes. So, Mr. Jamali, could you please come to the podium? Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Fellow councilors and the honorable viewers at home, I'd like to thank you for allowing me to speak this evening.
Certainly.
So it's quite unfortunate that today we are discussing something that should have been dealt with a long time ago. Niagara is a wonderful, diverse place, but hate, racism, and bigotry is well alive around here. We've seen that when some opinions are expressed on social media, they have led some individuals to commit acts of violence. Few examples. We've seen a number of ISIS sympathizers committing atrocious attacks against their communities. Likewise, we've seen one of Donald Trump's sympathizers commit a vicious attack against the Muslim community in Quebec. And our honorable Prime Minister has rightfully so called it a terrorist attack. Those two examples are a strong indication that when individuals hold positions of power, they make huge influence on others. The fact that an individual is elected by the public implies that there is a significant support for their views. Therefore, politicians have an added responsibility when exercising freedom of expression. Our code of conduct should include a recall process for any elected official that may endanger members of our communities by expressing their radical views and opinions on social media or anywhere else. At this point in time, asking the province for a municipal recall policy regarding hate speech would only be a reasonable request. In other words, I'm sincerely hoping that this regional council would develop a motion requesting a recall and send it to the 4 MPP representatives of Niagara to fight for it at Queen's Park. There's the only one example that I came across from searching on the net. There's an impeachment process in British Columbia. It allows constituents to start a petition after 18 months from the start of the electoral term. I'm hoping that this council would incorporate a similar request from the province. Mr. Chairman, I'll be happy to work with anyone who's willing to take initiative here. And I would like to thank you and the councillors as well as the staff for allowing me to speak tonight. Mr. Chairman?
Thank you very much, Mr. Jamali.
Thank you.
Are there any questions or comments from council? Councillor Timms?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Al Jamali, your request in your presentation is to ask us to look at the approach to recall or impeach, but recall, I think, is the term we use, and I understand it does happen in British Columbia. It suggests that you recognize that it is up to the public to judge their elected representatives. I remember a few years ago, the public had the chance to judge the elected representative every 3 years. And before that, I think they judged the councils every 2 years. But now we're into a 4-year term. And so the public only gets to judge us every 4 years. So is that part of the problem? And this approach of recall would allow at least the public to get involved somewhere in that 4-year period.
So through the chair to you, Councillor. Well, first of all, thanks for asking. And well, to begin with, the public memory is quite short. And as a result, as such a process, a recall process would most definitely be a necessary process within our code of conduct, if you will. Yeah, and I think this is what we should be aiming for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Beatty?
Thank you for a great presentation. With the example that you gave in British Columbia, is that recall process undertaken by the people of that council, or is it a third-party independent body? And secondly to that, is there a right of appeal, or what would be the process of appeal?
So through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor. So Mr. Beatty, I'm not sure about the right to appeal. I haven't gotten into those details, but I can assure you that such a request would demand at least 40% of the constituents of that area to sign up for a petition and start the process. I'm unaware of any further information.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Seeing no more speakers, I want to thank you for coming. Oh, sorry, Councillor Grenier.
Thank you, sir. Chairman, Councillor Beatty was going to be a little longer before I asked. If I can, through you to the presenter, are you aware that the part of the municipal act that renders people ineligible if they've been convicted of a crime?
Okay. No.
Okay. So if I can, Mr. Chairman, if I were to tell you that perhaps it would make it, rather than talk about recall, the ability to charge or have somebody be brought with file a complaint of a hate crime. If someone is ever convicted of that, they would be ineligible to sit on council. Similar with other things, if someone's caught for being impaired while operating a vehicle, if they're sentenced to more than 1 day in jail, they are immediately ineligible to be a councillor in Ontario. So if I was to suggest to you that maybe I appreciate where you're going, but I think that the idea of recall probably isn't going to go far, but I think the issue you have, and through passion and experience, is something you might want to help us refine to make requests to the province to work through some of the modernizations of code of conduct and behavior, to talk about how these could be added to that or access to that could be gained by a citizen. But I'm not sure that what you're asking for is going to get what you really are looking for. So if I were to suggest to you that maybe you could work with us a little longer and come back another time with working with an idea of how we could actually pass something that would be a little more effective and get an audience, that's something you'd be open to.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, yeah, Councillor, I'll be honored to start this process with you and with whomever is willing to put effort forward.
All right, thank
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And thank you once again for coming forward with your presentation. Appreciate that. Moving on, we know that the Integrity Commissioner had trouble getting out of Toronto and that we had been in communication. Good reason for GO train. We had communication with him just minutes ago, and we know that he is very close. I expect he's walking in the door anytime. In the meantime, I'd just like to put on the floor the only item we have tonight, which is COTWC 01-2017, which is a memorandum about the Consolidated Code of Conduct documents. So I'll ask for a mover for that. I see Councillor Joyner and a seconder. I see Councillor Volpatti. I just want to set, before we start into it, I want to set some context about where we've come from and where we're going. Back in July of this year, we, Regional Council, asked that the Code of Conduct be referred to the new Integrity Commissioner for comment and all correspondence associated with that, and that's ADR Chambers. We now have that Code of Conduct returned to us, and you've had a chance to review it. And there's a couple of proposed definitions that we have to talk about in terms of what their suggestions are. But hopefully everybody has had a chance to read the entire draft that's been presented to us. And I'm hoping that by the time we get to that point in the meeting, that the Integrity Commissioner is here to talk specifically about some of the items that he saw that we needed to improve on. He saw gaps in our Code of Conduct, and perhaps some improvements improvement opportunities that he recognized. So with that, committee really has some options on how it wishes to proceed. That being in its review and debate of the revised Code of Conduct. Committee may wish to open the floor for discussion or may wish to proceed in the review and debate with a page-by-page review. I see our Integrity Commissioner is in the room, so as soon as you're ready, you can come on down to the podium. You're here on cue. So in addition, the Integrity Commissioner, Mr. Edward McDermott, is here and available to answer questions or provide clarification. And so at this point, I'll just simply ask, what is committee's preference? How would they like to deal with it? Councillor Volpatti? No, it's committee.
Thank you, Chair. What I would like to do is begin by putting a motion on the floor that approves the Code of Conduct as presented.
Okay, is there a seconder for that? Councillor Timms?
No, we just did the memorandum.
No, no. So we have now the Code of Conduct memorandum is on the floor. Sorry, Madam Clerk. We have a mover and seconder for what's on the screen, that correspondence item COTWC 01-2017 being the memorandum from F. Fabiano, acting regional clerk, dated December 14th, 2017, respecting the Consolidated Code of Conduct documents be received, and that council adopt the revised Appendix A Code of Conduct, revised Appendix B Complaint Protocol, Code of Conduct, and revised Appendix C Accountability Framework as the new code of conduct. So I've got a speakers list going. Get in there, Tim. There you go.
So sorry, a point of
Yep.
order, Chair. So that motion is on the floor now?
The motion is on the floor.
Thank you.
Okay, first is Councillor Burrows.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And your first, as you opened, said, would you like to talk about it in general terms before we get to this? Suddenly, we're no longer debating that point. There's some basic fundamental issues in here that I believe have to be discussed. Then we can get to the detail. So,
Please continue.
well, I will continue. Thank you for that. I guess it's the main point is official capacity. And that, I've had some very good discussions. I've learned a lot earlier tonight. This is about a code of conduct for Niagara Regional Councillors. And I appreciate that while you're doing anything to do with council business, this would be the rules of the game. However, if I go over in this draft,
Page?
page 9, 5.1.d, have you got that? It says, respect the individual rights, values, beliefs, and personality traits of any other person. I get that. And refrain from imposing their own personal, moral, and religious beliefs on others. I get that. But what this says to me is, oh, when you're at council, respect others. But soon as you're off saying you're a personal, you're representing your own opinion, you can say whatever you like to whomever you like. And that is totally conflicting for me. I think most of us, when we run for office in whatever stages we're in, believe that we are held to a higher standard and should be. And that's in our own lives. I'm not worried about the integrity commissioner suddenly coming in and saying that I said something rude at church. That isn't what worries me. It's the image that wherever I am, whatever I'm doing, I'm a regional councillor. And I would like that, that Part D explained to me how you can have one set of rules while you're on council and another set when you're not.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Can I ask the Integrity Commissioner to? I'll let you catch up, Mr. Integrity Commissioner. Are you ready?
Yes, well, I guess I am. I never realized, and I apologize to you, Mr. Chair, and members of council for being late. I never realized how far this really was from downtown Toronto. But I found out, I'll tell you, I've never seen traffic like that in my life.
So, Mr. McDermott, just to put it in context, I'm sure that's going to be the main question on everybody's mind right now. So you might want to start right from the very beginning on, you know, what your thought process is and how you come to the conclusions that you do.
All right, Mr. Chair, thank you.
Clock.
My apologies.
Clock.
Just a point of order. Hopefully the Integrity Commissioner may spend all of Gary's time, more than 8 minutes. So can we just stop the clock, Mr. Burrows,
I think that
until we
would
hear
be,
the presentation? Can they quote, anybody pick that up?
Whether it's running or not, we're going to listen to the Integrity Commissioner talk. Please continue.
Let's try to get myself sorted out here. Mr. Chair, I think it's appropriate at this point, since the clock's off, that I can first introduce myself.
Yes, please.
I was referred by the chair as Edward McDermott, and that indeed is my name, but I go by the name of Ted. I had the privilege of being appointed sometime in August, I believe, as the Integrity Commissioner of this region. One of the things that I did after receiving that appointment was to go through this evolution of the Code of Conduct and to educate myself about what the history of it had been. And what I found out was that this council on December 6, 2016, some 1 year ago, the day before Pearl Harbor, decided that they would review the Code of Conduct that was in place at that point in time. The matter then went before the Procedural Bylaw Committee and was subject to review at that point by what's called the PBRC, who made some suggested amendments which were then incorporated into the document. There was then a series, first of all, the PBRC also made a determination to engage the firm of Aird and Burles to prepare a code of conduct. And that was undertaken by Mr. Masker, the former Integrity Commissioner. And as you will well realize, that he spent a considerable amount of time reviewing other codes that are in place in the municipality to come up with the draft code that he was presenting. So he did that. It was then went before the PBRC, and it was subject to I think something in the order of a 13-page letter explaining why he felt that the particular provisions that are before you were appropriate in this particular circumstance. And there was then a draft of the code itself and of the bylaw, which provides for the creation of the Integrity Commissioner and removal thereof. There was then a process that went through after that the PBRC took the document that Mr. Mascarin had prepared. They reviewed it, they made comments, they made amendments that were put forward, and one of the things I remember reading was that the concept of the code being applied in their official capacity was first generated through the PBRC. And that's how that concept got to be introduced to the document. It was not there at the outset. Following that, the council, or the PBRC, determined that there should be the consultations and input from various stakeholders in this matter, one of which was the public. So there was a public meeting held where people were invited to and did make comments with respect to their views on certain provisions of this code of conduct. Following that, it was then put by this council that that the views of the constituent municipalities of the region should be consulted. And that was done, and the constituent municipalities were good enough to provide the codes that they had in place at that point in time, or not, because it's not an obligatory thing at this point in time, at least, to actually have a code. But they went ahead and they made submissions with respect to this evolving code, and they sent along their own codes, some of which were quite substantial, and showed that a lot of time and effort had gone into them. So that input was made as well. There's also been, as we progress through this matter, there's also been input from members of council from time to time, producing other amendments which have crept into or marched into the draft code. Along then comes young Mr. McDermott. Mr. McDermott is appointed in August as the Integrity Commissioner of this region. Had the privilege of being appointed. And along the way, as we progressed through September and time was going on, because don't forget, you started this process back in December of 2016, and because I guess I was new boy on the block, I was asked to look at the work that had been accumulated to date and to make comments. And I did that. And I made quite a number of comments, not 13 pages full, but a number of comments where I thought certain improvements could be made on the document that was in front of me, recognizing that it was not my role or my position to start creating a new document from scratch, because the region had already spent a considerable amount of time, effort, and money in the context of getting the document to where it was at that point in time. And there was absolutely no point in trying to repeat that process by asking me to undertake the creation of a code which somebody suggested would be the best in the world. I said, well, there's no such thing as the best code in the world. It doesn't exist. A code of conduct is an evolving document, and it's a living document, and yet that's why it's amended from time to time as things turn out not to work or are too oppressive on one or other of the stakeholders. So that process then unfolded. I made the comments. A number of those comments I take it came before the PBRC or some body of council, and a number of them were incorporated into the document itself. At that point in time, you were then marching along towards where we are here today. And I take the time to go through this because I want everybody should remember the type of time and effort that has gone into creating this and the money that's gone into creating this to get it to this point. That doesn't mean that council should not come forward with whatever suggested amendments they have, or at this point in time. But at this point in time, I just wanted you to know the process and the contributions that have already gone through this document to get it to where it is. Having said that, I also decline ownership in it because I didn't create it. However, I'm happy to help in any way I can if any of the members of council have specific questions that they wish to bring forward. I'll see if I can give my views on what I think it means at this point in time without committing what exactly it means, because you never know that if you adopt it, the next day it may be before me and I'm going to have to make a decision based upon the facts in any given situation, which, as we all know, vary from time to time. So you can't give a definitive answer. This clause means that. If you take that gift, you're dead. That's not the purpose of tonight, I don't think. But I'm happy to help wherever I can. The one thing that I also want to remind you of, and I guess it was my suggestion, attached to the code is a complaint protocol, investigation and complaint protocol of some substance. I suggested, and I think it's been incorporated, because originally a protocol was going to be incorporated as part of the bylaw. And I suggested that that protocol should be qualified to the extent that it's not really part of the bylaw, but is subject to change at any time in accordance with the policies of council from time to time. And the reason for that is that I think that procedures or protocols as you go along to deal with complaints that come up change from time to time. Some don't work. And so rather than creating a new bylaw and going through a whole process in that respect, we leave it to council to decide based upon what's brought before them at any given time as to whether or not the particular element of the investigation and report procedure is wanting. So it just makes it a little easier, I think, for council to deal with things that might come up with respect to the process that council is not content with. So you'll be able to deal with that. So while you see that protocol there and it looks somewhat intimidating, it's not really. And it's subject to change at any given time upon the will of council. So that gets me back to where we were, Councillor Burrows. I forget your question.
So I think it was regarding, Councillor Burrows, do you want to repeat your?
Sure, and it was specifically in reference to, on the draft, 5.1.d, as the starting point, it says respect individual rights, values, beliefs, and personality traits of any other person. And we stroked out and refrain from imposing their own personal, moral, and religious beliefs on others. I get it as far as the code of conduct that you would be looking after, but how, if any one of us, the 30 of us, started imposing our own personal beliefs, I don't believe, and maybe that's what I'm doing, but I don't believe you can separate me as a regional councillor and me as somebody that works at the church. That when I'm doing something, he's one of the regional councillors. So I need a separation in order for me to support this. I get the point that the code of conduct is about the council, but I'm talking about the personal code of conduct as it relates to this and the use of regional councillor.
And it's a good point. Council has to make that determination because I agree with you. I think when you color it with the opening words that these sections, which have a lot of good principles and statements of principle in it, the one that you've referred to in particular, Article 5 with the general obligations, which sets forth the way that council expects its members to conduct themselves. It's qualified by the words in the preamble in their official capacity.
Which I disagree with. That's my problem.
And yeah, and it is an issue, and it's an issue, and that the issue developed because of the words official capacity were injected in various places into the code. And you're right, so that's worth debating, and it depends upon whether the council wishes to qualify it that respect or not. I have no idea why that was injected at that point in time, but I rather suspect that councilors have private lives and they don't think they should be regulated by matters of this nature, which deal with the course of their engagement and service on behalf of the public when they're sitting on the dock drinking gin swishies.
If it wasn't gin swishies and it was something else, I still think that there's a moral code that may not be enforceable under our code of conduct. And I can't get that separation where at work you've got a code, the rest of the time you're on your own, you can do whatever you like. I just don't, I can't accept that. Thank you.
I tend to agree with Councillor Burrows in that the way I act in my capacity as chair has to be the same way I act in my capacity, no matter where I am. But let's listen to there's a list of speakers. Let's go through the speakers list. Councillor Timms.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to discuss the same issue. And the motion on the floor, I think, adopts the wording here that says under general obligation, in carrying out their duties in their official capacities, members shall. And I firmly believe that that's the limits we should put on this code. I don't like to see a code that's going to have this council judging me on my conduct elsewhere. The general public will judge me. We all know once you're a politician, once you're a councillor, the public is going to observe and see you, record you, film you 24/7, 365 days a year. We all understand that. And that's where the public and the voters will judge the moral code. But this is about the code of conduct for council, created by council to judge council, and therefore judge council when they're acting in their official capacity. And I think that needs to be limited to that scope, because we are asking, this is a code of conduct that is developed by us. We ask the integrity commissioner to analyze complaints, but in the end, we judge and we execute whatever penalty we decide. And I don't see how this group can judge me at my church or at my local pub. That is the job of the public. And I think what Mr. Al-Jamali was talking about was the problem these days is that judgment can only be executed by the public every 4 years. Used to be, maybe there was value in it in the old days, they would execute that judgment every 2 years, and then it was every 3 years for a number of terms, and now it's 4 years. So that creates a problem, but it still doesn't, I don't want to see this council judging any one of us on their private lives. And it is, I think, very important to make that attachment, because when we look at 5.1, and then you look at A, B, C, D through H, in terms of in official capacity, I think it covers the concern about in number D that Councillor Burrs was talking about. In my official capacity, I'd be happy to refrain from imposing my personal and moral religious beliefs on others. But when I go to my little church in Port Dalhousie on Sunday, I say a creed that states my beliefs and is contrary to several other religions around the world and several other creeds. But nobody's going to judge me on that, and they shouldn't have the right to. And you might think that's an extreme example, but we've seen, I think Mr. Mascarin had an interpretation of imposing their personal and moral views. So I'd be interested in what your interpretation of how a counselor imposes their personal views. Because that's the operative following acting in official capacity.
Mr. McDermott?
And you're referring to which subsection again, sir?
5.1D.
D, respect the individual rights, values, beliefs, and personality traits?
Yeah, so in your version, you have stricken out the refrain from imposing, and some might argue that it should be back in. I like the fact that it's stricken out, and I believe item 5.1D deals with the subject adequately for the purpose of my acting in official capacity.
Mm-hmm.
So why did you strike out or leave that refrain from imposing stricken from the code?
I'm not, oh, I see what you're saying, yes. I didn't do that, somebody else did that.
Well, you left it in, so I'm pleased that you did. Because what's on the floor is this version, this draft version.
Well, the draft version is deletes refrain from imposing their own personal, moral, and religious beliefs on others.
So I'm pleased with that. I just wondered if you had a reason for leaving it deleted.
I think that was done at an earlier stage in the process, sir.
So you agree with it, though? Yeah, agreed to delete. You did not recommend we put it back in other words.
No, I didn't. No, I didn't.
That's fair enough. So my next question
But
is.
because there's a division, you're making a division here.
Yeah.
And you've done it by injecting into it things like official capacity, but you're going to be governed by this code in matters that naturally relate to your role as a counselor for the region and your conduct in that respect. And I think what had come through from the earlier amendments that were made is that that line, that demarcation, is something that, whether it was the PBRC or whoever it was, felt that it was important to do. And that therefore, your private lives should not be regulated by this. Whether or not it should be, I think, is a matter for debate. That's council's decision.
Okay, so I'm speaking in favor of what's been recommended as seconding the motion. The second question I'd ask you is the relative terms, the code of conduct that we develop versus the declaration of office that we all take under oath at the beginning of a term. And to me, that is the guiding, the principle, the main obligation to my taxpayers, to the provincial government, to those that elected me, is this declaration of office. Are you familiar with it?
No, I'm not. Would you assist me in that respect?
Yes, well, I'd be happy to. It reads that I, Bruce Timms, do solemnly promise and declare that I will truly, faithfully, and impartially, to the best of my knowledge and ability, execute the office of regional councillor to which I have been elected in this municipality, that I have not received and will not receive any payment or reward or promise thereof for the exercise of any partiality or malversation or other undue execution of this office, and that I will disclose any pecuniary interest, direct or indirect, as required by the accordance in the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. And I make this solemn declaration conscientiously believing it to be true and knowing that it is the same force and effect as if made under oath. So that is the declaration
Point of order,
the
Mr. Chair.
terms of office.
Recognizing point of order.
On point of order, should we stay with the first issue? We were talking in broad terms as to whether, when is it your official capacity? Shouldn't we resolve that issue and then move on to another one? Or are we going to just hopscotch around until tomorrow.
I think the main issue that has challenged us in the past is official capacity. So, you know, if we can get that behind us, I think that'll go a long way to solving the majority concern of many councillors. Would you agree?
Yeah, like we all have a number of concerns, I suppose,
Yeah.
but shouldn't we?
Well, I have my 10 minutes and you're eating into it, George.
I'm not sure you're acting in your official capacity now, but I'm not even sure what that means, and that's what I wanted to find out. But that's what we should be discussing and nothing else until that's resolved.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So since 1991, the declaration of office has been my definition of acting in official capacity, and it lays out what I should or should not do in the execution of this office. So what I'm asking the Integrity Commissioner is, this is primary, this takes precedence, and this is set by the province. This code of conduct is a different thing. It's set by this council, for this council, about the business of this council. So understanding the ranking here would...
May I, Mr. Chair?
Yes, please.
You're quite right, Councillor, but you also have to bear in mind that the two documents, the declaration that you make upon assuming the office and the code of conduct, are not necessarily inconsistent. In fact, one incorporates the other. The declaration that you read says, I promise to do whatever the code says. And then you're right, the code has to be created. So what's going to be in the code? And once again, you don't even have to have a code at the moment.
Right.
But you've decided to have a code, and you've had one since 2013. And then you decided to take a look at it and see what amendments should be made to it in your judgment to make it a more fulsome document. So that at the point in time that we get to this particular issue that's before council at the moment, you have to look at the code, which is being incorporated into the declaration. The code itself, in its draft form, has now been amended by the injection of a concept that it's only going to apply when we are in our official capacity. Mm-hmm. You say, well, what does that mean? Right? And there was a definition that was in place in the code itself as to what official capacity means. That was changed, by the way. There's an alteration to that because it defined official capacity as meaning certain actions taken by a member on Niagara property, actions taken during Niagara regional events and functions, taken during non-Niagara regional events and functions where the member has been expressly invited as a member, actions taken where a member is representing a constituent in matters concerning business conducted by the Niagara region, actions taken over social media that is in relation to the aforementioned circumstances. My suggestion in that respect, that if that's all the words official capacity mean, it's a pretty narrow concept. Therefore, I changed the word means to includes, because there could be many other situations where it would be arguable that you're acting within your official capacity when you say something or do something you shouldn't do. So it's really a hybrid between the two versions of what you and Councillor Burrows are putting forward in this respect, I think. It leaves the door open, in other words.
So you did change what was originally submitted by
Absolutely.
adding the word include.
I take full responsibility for that, because I thought it was too narrow. That was my view of it.
All right. So what's in front of us, what's on the table, is the current definition that you have changed, and I forget what the wording was before, but official capacity includes?
There wasn't wording before.
Okay, so this definition says includes but not limited to is really the implication. Okay, and well, my concern is that it should be limited to, because my obligation to the public is this declaration of office, and the public gets to judge that every 4 years. And as a councillor, I know they're assessing 24/7, 365 days a year, as never before. With they judge us on social media. They will take pictures, tapes, recordings, anytime, anywhere, any place. And I'm quite open to that, well understood that the public has that opportunity more than ever. And I'm quite willing to be judged by the public every 4 years, but I'm not willing to let or have this council, these 31 people, judge me beyond the business of this council. And we have a memo from the clerk. I wonder if you've seen the memo from the clerk that speaks to a phrase about business of the region means any matter related to the purposes or included in discharge duties of which regional council has been advised and the regional chair has approved. And there's some alternatives offered there, but it implies to me that I have to inform regional council and get the chairman's approval to speak to the Merit and Lions Club about the business of the region. And that's a constituency I serve. And I'm looking for perhaps clarification of where this suggestion in the clerk's memo applies to the code that's on the floor.
Just to be clear,
The
Councillor
presenter's
Timms.
not familiar with it, so how do we answer that?
Just to be clear, Councillor Timms, the second definition on the back of that same memo excludes, is without the approval of the regional chair.
And without informing council? And how does that, I'm not clear how that fits into what's on the floor, which is what's on the floor is the attached draft. The Integrity Commissioner has changed at least the very important word from include, but not limited to, which to my mind implies that you're suggesting this, even with these definitions, it still leaves us open to a code of conduct on our daily lives well outside the business of this council. So now I'm concerned about what you've presented in the motion that I've seconded. If that is the intention, is to leave it open then to anyone or this council can judge a complaint against me by anyone for anything on my life 24/7, 365.
Well, your point is well taken, Councillor, but I also wish to remind you that the words official capacity mean something.
Yes.
They have meaning. The purpose in altering the definition to make it inclusive as opposed to these specific 4 items is so that there is room to interpret the words official capacity, which I wouldn't think, in my humble view, would include a situation where you're visiting your own place of worship. But it leaves it to me at the end of the day to say, well, that particular situation, he really is acting in his official capacity, or he's not.
Okay, so
Councillor
in
Timms,
response-
I'm going to move on to the next speaker with the provision that you can weigh in a second time if you feel you need to after the speakers. There's a long list here.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Councillor Rigby?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to be sure as to what the procedure is that we're doing here.
Okay.
Unfortunately, we have a motion to adopt what is has been recommended, although I'm not sure what that is. And also having the opportunity to ask Mr. McDermott the question. So because at some point, I might want to put forward another motion. I don't want to do it now. Will you give me that opportunity after everyone has completed their questions, if I feel it's necessary?
Well, you mean an amendment? Because obviously there's a motion on the floor that we're talking to right now.
I'm talking about a presenter here. That's the problem, is that here we are. We're not talking about a motion that's just been put in front of us. We're really not clear whether we really have a recommendation that this motion's referring to. And frankly, we're 2 people short. 2 people walk out of this room and we don't have a meeting. And we have a lot of good people that aren't sitting at their chairs because of previous commitments, because this meeting was, for all the good reasons, has been put in place for tonight, and that was never scheduled in our long-range planning. And we're actually being asked to ignore those people and to go forward. So it may behoove us to allow for this discussion and make some recommendations as a committee and still allow for a council, full council, to approve it. And I'm sorry, that's my issue. And I don't want to speak too much to that. I would prefer to defer it, but I'm not going to do that, obviously, because I can't. But I'm interested in the answers that we're getting, and I do have a couple of questions.
So
That's why I'm asking you, will you let me, if I feel it's necessary, to put forward another motion if it's necessary? A deferral motion, frankly, would be it.
No, that's not in order. But what is in order is
Then that's the problem.
Yeah, okay. Well,
So if you want me to move a deferral motion?
Counselor, so this was put forward December 4th. The notice of this meeting was put forward December 4th, which is 2 weeks ago.
Appreciate that.
2 weeks ago. Council decided that this is a high priority and something that we need to deal with. So I've done everything in my power to try and facilitate that for this council and get it on the floor, as well as arranging for the IC to be here to ask questions. You know, now that we've got it back, you know, we follow council's direction to send it to the IC, ask for recommendations, and here it is back.
But these aren't recommendations, Mr. Chair.
I'm willing, this is
No,
his recommendation.
seriously.
I'm willing to, you know, listen to any amendment that you have, anything that you would like to change. This is open, there's a list of speakers. It
Yeah.
may be worthwhile having a listen to what other speakers are saying, and perhaps it may develop an amendment that you want to put forward.
That's fine, that's what I'm asking. Because I want to make sure I understand the rules of engagement here. As per se, I'm not, all I can say about people coming around this time of year plan ahead. And there are, as we know, members who have made long-term arrangements to go places and do things, and they're not here. And there's too many of them not here, in my opinion. So that's, if I may, just ask the questions of Mr.
So the one
McDermott.
thing before you do, I'll just add that the Integrity Commissioner has already mentioned that this is a living document.
Yep.
A living document that council has the ability to change at will. And I encourage councilors to consider that when they're considering the motion tonight. It has the ability for council to make changes when they feel that the code of conduct is no longer relevant or needs to be updated for a particular reason. That facility is going to be available. So please continue with your questions.
Thank you. And I appreciate that. I really do. And it's a matter of how we go about it. And I'm back to D again.
Okay.
And refrain from imposing their own personal, moral, religious beliefs.
5.1D.
5.1, yes.
Yep.
Thank you. I think the most of us that are here were elected, if not all, were on the basis of their own personal, moral, respectful, and decency, first and foremost when they're elected. And build into that is religious belief. So I understand what Councillor Burrows and his issue, and I don't know whether that could be built in, not so much that it's religious beliefs or where we are obligated as Canadians to respect everyone's religion, whether they have a real or a verified membership or not, and respect their own personal beliefs. And I would suggest that perhaps it could be added in the personal traits of any other person, but being respectful and being level of decency when they are addressing other people. So I'm not sure how we do that, Mr. Commissioner.
Mr. McDermott?
Those words were deleted
Yeah.
early on in the process. And if the debate is whether or not those words should be, continue to be
Yeah.
accepted from
Yeah.
this part of the general obligations, or they should be included. My only comment that I can offer is, and I think it was voiced earlier by another councillor, what does that mean, imposing? I think there's a difference in my mind, subject to being changed in any given situation, that imposing is a much more aggressive posture than simply saying. Posing and saying to me are two different things. Imposing seems to have, connotes to me that it's got an action imposed to it where you're trying to force your views onto someone else.
Okay, thank you. The other is in the area of the 16.2, which is some differences in words. I suppose you have been suspended and you've taken out removed. I understand that. What is the rationale for the 60 days or 90 days and then shall require approval of at least 2/3 of council present?
Mr. McDermott?
It's the 90 days I'm asking.
I don't know.
Okay, so, but you've struck it out,
No, I didn't.
wasn't it? Okay, it's back.
It's already done.
Okay, sorry, or not appointed to the membership on committee. That's taken.
That was done very
And that's-
early on in
okay,
the
so that's
process,
right.
Councillor.
All right, and then be suspended or not appointed. You've taken that out as chair, so those are things that we can do.
Well-
And you do approve that as well.
My issue with that whole section, 16.2, quite frankly,
Yeah,
was that, and my comment on it was that council should seek advice of legal counsel
okay,
as to whether it has the ability to do this in accordance with the provisions of the Municipal Act. And by the way, I'm not offering legal opinions on anything,
yeah, okay. All right.
okay? I'm retired, I don't practice, and I don't have any insurance.
Good move. All right, so,
So I suggested that that be reviewed with legal counsel. It's still there. It's still there in the draft, simply because it can only be done upon the recommendation of the Integrity Commissioner. So that I guess if the Integrity Commissioner considers that council can't do it, he's not going to recommend it. Bearing in mind that the fundamental penalty that can be imposed is already specified in the statute as two things: a reprimand or a suspension of pay for a period up to 90 days for a violation of the code. Those are the only two penalties that are in the code. And my reading of it is, I'll tell you, that they're either or it could be interpreted as either or, so that it would only be one of them. I understand that integrity commissioners often make recommendations beyond that. And, you know, if council so empowers the integrity commissioner to do so, then there may well not be a problem. My only comment on it really was that council should make sure they have the authority to do this before they put it in. It's in there because it's subject to the fail-safe that you, under this provision of the code at least, you can't do it unless I recommend it.
if the integrity, if acting as an integrity commission, there are certain penalties that are listed by this council, as an example. Is that helpful, or is that?
It certainly would give me a guide as to what type of, the scope of the type of sanction that
Yes.
council would like to put in, have the ability to put in place.
Yes.
If I determined as integrity commissioner that it was appropriate to do so. So, you know, it communicates that, there's no question about it. My question is, in the context of a code where you're looking at a statute which only gives you the power to impose two specific penalties, are you enabled to do these additional things, even if I recommend them? That was my comment, Mr. Chair. So I assume
that
that
would
it's,
be our
at some
legal-
point it should be referred to regional solicitor.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Barrick?
Thank you, Chair. I have some comments and some questions, and I guess I'll start in order of magnitude, I think, given the time. And first off, I guess Through you to the guest speaker. I received recently an email from somebody concerned with respect to some of the commentary in a radio interview on 6:40 a.m. and 9:00 a.m. on December 8th. The interview was one of our local reporters, Bill Sawchuk from Post Media. And in that discussion, he mentioned very clearly, quote unquote, "I have contacts at regional government that have been leaking information to me at great risk to themselves," end quote. And Chair, why that's a concern to me is we're here talking about a code of conduct. There's a big section in here about confidentiality. We have a reporter who has publicly stated, regularly there's regional officials who leak confidential information to help get a story out. That should be a concern to everyone here. And the question that I have is, what's the exchange for information? Positive press? I'd almost suggest the media have a conflict in even covering what I'm talking about because they'll want to protect their sources, which is more troublesome to me. And so I alluded to here, number one, already there's a big confidentiality section. There's a gifts and benefits section and a conflict of interest section. Gifts and benefits. It speaks to any form of personal benefit. And I guess my question would be through to the speaker, guest speaker, is if we know that information is being shared, leaked to the press, in exchange, that individual or individuals get positive press to keep the information flowing and encourage the continued leaks. Is that considered a personal benefit with respect to gifts and benefits under the Code of Conduct? Right.
It's a hard question to answer in the abstract. It doesn't sound to me like it's gifts and benefits. It sounds to me like if the allegations are true, it might well involve a contravention of the confidentiality obligations that are set forth in the code.
So how do you define any form of personal benefit, if not handing over confidential information in exchange for positive press?
What section are you referring to?
8.1. Members shall not accept a fee, advance gift, gift certificate, cash, hospitality, or any form of personal benefit connected directly or indirectly with the performance of his or her duties.
On a case-by-case basis. Once again, it's the type of thing that you can't just give an omnibus answer to. It would have to depend upon what the particular facts of the circumstances are that are brought before me. So you can't answer that in a basket.
But certainly the confidentiality is
just
undeniable.
Well, I mean, that's really the thrust of what you're saying. If it's true, it's a breach of the confidentiality obligations of a member of council. Obviously, that's something where a complaint to be registered would be investigated. And we would be looking at this wording in here to govern us as to whether or not it was within the bounds of a confidential communication, and secondly, whether or not it was improperly disclosed. If it was, then the normal process would unfold, as a result of which a determination would be made and a report would be submitted to council, and council would decide what penalties it felt empowered to administer for that.
And then as well, possibly the conflict of interest section may apply? Conflicting loyalties when making decisions at this table?
That's a little more of a stretch, I think, but certainly it's something that we'd look at if it were raised.
Okay, thanks for that. So that's a big concern of mine. I want it to be somehow recognized in here. Yes, it's a confidentiality breach, but if I give information to my neighbor, that's a confidentiality breach. If I give it to a reporter for a story and I continue to get good positive press, that goes beyond simply confidentiality, in my view. And to your point, yeah, maybe there needs to be a specific case to be hashed out, but it is a concern of mine. There's the counselor ability to complain about a counselor in here right now. We talked about it before. Personally, Counselor Maves and I have been working on this file for years, even last term. It's come up several iterations, I believe the gentleman mentioned, since 2013. We've stated, well, I'll speak for myself, I've stated that this is a form of a political weapon, and nothing makes it more articulate than giving the counselor an ability to complain about another counselor in terms of the ability to be a political weapon. So I do have concerns with that aspect of it. The official capacity portion, I'm in agreement with Councillor Timms and others. It's hypocritical. We've had guest speakers here before saying, you're in your official capacity 24/7, 365, code applies. The very same people come back at another time with respect to councillors' expenses saying, whoa, you weren't acting as a regional councillor there. You can't claim that expense. It's just hypocritical and it's ridiculous. So yes, people have day jobs, people have private lives. To allow this political weapon to be utilized 24/7, in my view, is not appropriate and not in the interest of the public we serve. I had some questions about when there's a complaint filed and it gets dismissed by the Integrity Commissioner. So through you, I had a complaint about me previously, and it was dismissed immediately. And I know others have had complaints and they're dismissed. So they don't even, you can clarify for me, but they don't even get to the point of being recognized to be worthy of investigating. They're just so outrageous. And so what's the status of the dismissed? Or does it become public? In other words, the one about me previously, I was kind of quiet. In fact, I wasn't even advised. The Integrity Commissioner didn't even advise the person until well after the fact, almost in passing, saying, oh yeah, and there was this about you, but I didn't tell you. Would the counselor be advised, number one? And number two, does the complaint become public and the person complaining become public and then just noted dismissed? If you can answer that, but what you're thinking about it, where I'm getting at is an individual chronic complainer, and now you've got a body of about 50 complaints that builds up a case of frivolous and vexatious that otherwise people may not know about.
Mr. McDermott?
Well, it may well go beyond, if you look at the protocol which is attached to the draft code of conduct, there is the ability of the Integrity Commissioner to determine when a complaint is made, whether it's within his mandate and jurisdiction as well, quite apart from something that may be frivolous or vexatious. And certainly there, I personally know it with respect to my experience so far, that there are complaints that have been made that have been dismissed without any further public airing of it, simply because it had nothing to do with the code. And my view on that, quite frankly, is that the commissioner should have that ability, and I would not make it public. If you make it public, then it's a matter of controversy as to whether or not it was true or not true. Did the commissioner act properly, jurisdiction, non-jurisdiction? Ultimately, it ends up before you with the cost and expense of doing that. And I just didn't think that was worth it. Another thing, another amendment that has been put in here, and I put it in, I confess it, is that, and it's in the protocol, I believe, the procedure is that I can make a decision that even though a complaint may have some merit, but on the face of the complaint, the situation is such that even if I found it all to be true and proven after a full investigation, with the cost that the region would have to bear in connection with that, if at the end of the day I would not have done anything more than the counselor has already done. So that is written into the protocol as well at this point in time. I'll try and find it.
If I may, Chair, just because I'm nearing the 10 minutes, while he's looking for that information, I'll just wrap up the commentary. That's okay, Councilor Volpatti.
If you look at the complaint protocol in response to your question, Councillor, You will find it at section 6, subsection E.
So there was conversation earlier about section, I think 3.1K, that's with respect to the definition of official capacity. And earlier it was described that it was purposefully adjusted from official capacity means XYZ to official capacity includes. And my preference is, again, less discretion, respectfully, on the behalf of the Integrity Commissioner to determine what's in and what's out, and more clarity for everyone on exactly what it means on the front end. So when the appropriate time comes, I'd like to make the amendment to change it from includes to means. Close the door. We heard earlier, and I know that he's nodding his head here, he left the door open on purpose. I don't see any value in that except more confusion, more complaints, more controversy. This should be designed to provide clarity, and adding the word includes, not limited to, just keeps the door open and doesn't solve any.
Can you tell me again what number? And
3.1, okay?
3.1.
In fact, most of the definitions include the word means. There's a few that includes, but most of them include that word means, again, to close the loop on it. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Councillor Volpatti?
Thank you, Chair. At the outset of my comments, let me say that I thank you very much for calling this meeting. I had a party to go to tonight, but I considered this to be much more important. That's why I'm here. To go on, I certainly support the official capacity concept. I know the code of conduct applies to me when I act in my official capacity. I have a personal code of conduct that applies to me at all times. I don't think any of us would be elected to this office if we didn't have such a moral code. I'm also concerned, and the issue is raised for me around 5.1 D, and I'm glad we crossed it out. Refrain from imposing their own personal moral and religious beliefs on others. I personally am not an evangelist, but I know there are members of this council who are evangelists, who will be standing on the street corner, who follow their Bible religiously, have it with them at all times, and live by that. And we have freedom of religion in Canada, and I expect that they would not be punished for doing that. And there's some tenets of our laws that they are against because of their religion. When they're acting in their official capacity, I would not expect them to refer to their own religious beliefs. But when they're standing on the street corner evangelizing, then I would accept that they have a right to do that, whether they're a counselor or not. So I have a real issue with that. And that brings to my mind the issue of freedom of speech. We're not Americans. We do not have a total right to freedom of speech. There are 7 conditions under which we don't have freedom of speech, and all of those conditions have to be met, by the way, before we don't have the right anymore. And I heard someone refer to hate crimes. We can go so far with this that we have no freedom of speech remaining, and that is an abiding concern of mine. I belong to a church. We don't evangelize. I'm a Roman Catholic. We have certain beliefs that do not correspond to the laws of Canada. When I'm in my official capacity, I do not express those beliefs. But when I'm in my church, I do. And when I'm with people of the Roman Catholic faith, when I'm discussing things with them, I do agree with them. But that is a private thing. But you have left no room for privacy if we don't have official capacity. There's no room for my private beliefs. I'm very strong in some of those beliefs. So just to put that out there, I don't want official capacity so I can go in some bar and hit somebody or whatever. I don't want official capacity because it relieves me of the problem of being nice all the time or polite all the time. But I have a life. I think I conduct it very well, thank you very much. I would never dream of hurting anyone or anything. But I don't want to pull into a parking space at my local grocery store and somebody say to me, aha, you took my parking space, now I'm going to report you to the Integrity Commissioner. And that could well happen. Or sitting in a bar, having a, I don't drink beer, having a martini. And somebody doesn't like that. Sorry. I feel very strongly about this. As Councillor Tim said, we have an oath. I take the oath. I mean every word of it. This is an extension of our oath, and the code of conduct is included in the oath. But I really do believe that at times around here we've been engaging in a witch hunt. Absolutely I do. And I don't like it one little bit. That my, or anybody's, not only my own, that anybody's private beliefs should be a threat to them. So going on with smaller matters. Counselor versus counselor. To bring an action against another counselor. Really, we need to have this in here? Like, I'm going to bring an action against, all right, I'll pick on Bob Gale because he's easy to pick on. I'm going to bring an action against Bob Gale because he says something to me in the heat of an argument that is untoward. Really? That's what we've come to? Niagara Falls does what? Well, maybe you should reread the paper because the council as a whole has taken an action against a particular councillor who could not be brought to, well, whatever they're doing.
We'll stay on the questions.
Yeah, thank you. But for me to bring an action against anybody that's sitting around the table here with me, I would never, ever think of doing such a thing. Because what I would do is go and talk to them and say, what the heck are you talking about? Why did you say that to me? Don't do it again, or whatever. But I don't need to go to a marshal for my complaint. I don't like it. Official capacity is my big thing. I don't like that part, counselor suing counselor, or to me, all right, maybe it's not a suit, whatever it is, a charge against another counselor. If the whole council, and I think maybe that's a different issue, decides that one of their members is so inappropriate that 2/3 of us agree that we have to somehow rein this person in, all right, I can see that there may be extenuating circumstances. But in my opinion, there's no time when I would bring a charge against somebody that I try to work with on a cooperative basis every time I'm here and even when I'm not here. The issue of confidentiality is very, very important to me. And I didn't know that was said on the radio. And I believe Councillor Barrett when he says it was. That's totally unacceptable. That somebody is taking the information from this chamber when we're in Canberra and releasing it to the press. Surely that's a criminal action. And I'd like your opinion on that, sir. I mean, confidentiality is a charge that we take under our oath of office.
Mr. McDermott?
Yes, and you're quite right, Councillor. You do take that as your oath of office, and I think it's expanded upon in the course of this document that's being prepared so that it's a little clearer to everybody what that means. Because we have a whole section with subsections.
Can you give me the section, please?
Sorry?
The section?
9.
9.
9. And it actually goes on in the same vein through 9.1,
Right.
9.1 through 9.6. So there's a whole 6 sections in here reinforcing the obligation to treat matters that are confidential in confidence. To me, that's a reinforcement of exactly what you were saying.
Yeah, but my question, what's the remedy? The remedy for that, we have therefore broken an oath, not only our code of conduct, we have betrayed an oath. And I think that is really egregious. That is egregious. I'm not sure that, I mean, how are we going to find out who this person is? We can't. The press, and I understand the press's position, that they would never betray someone in that way, and I understand why. But that is probably one of the most egregious things that can happen, is that someone betrays us like that with information that should be confidential. And I would like our solicitor's opinion on 16.2, the section on what we may do, the written apology, 16.2A to D, if I can, through you, Chair.
Councillor, you're at 10 minutes. Councillor, you're at 10 minutes now. We'll have to wrap up, and there's a long list still.
All right, so at some point, I hope we get the solicitor's opinion.
Okay, thank you. I'll move to Councillor Campion.
Yes, a couple of questions first. I'm finding this a bit confusing, just the documents themselves.
Okay.
And I think other people are getting a little bit confused as to who made what changes. So my first question through you to Mr. McDermott is, you mentioned that you brought forward several, either 10 or 11 recommendations that you see were not included in the document. Is that correct?
Or were included.
Or were, okay.
The suggestion was they be
Okay.
amended or removed.
Gotcha. So, but it's unclear to me what you're recommending and what you aren't based on the document, right? Because it's not annotated that
Yeah,
he
you
made
don't have
this change and didn't.
You
make
don't
that
have a blue lined or a red lined copy in front of you, I take it,
I
Councillor.
don't know. So that's part of my confusion.
I have the advantage on you.
So through you, Chair, I would ask the question. I have an issue with the concept of official capacity. I have a great deal of difficulty having that in there. So were any of your points that you brought forward, sir, related to that particular item?
Yes, they were. The point that I brought forward was, I'm trying to find it here in the, yeah, we've already talked about it, but subsection H of
Point of
the,
order, Chair.
Yes, what is your point of order?
Why are some of us engaging in conversations when we should be participating in the meeting?
Could I please ask that the gallery take the conversations outside chambers if you want to continue? Thank you. Mr. McDermott?
as a councillor, I did make one change to the definition of official capacity, as we've discussed before. Official capacity was defined in this document originally as meaning A, B, C, and D, that's it. And I changed it to say includes, because official capacity may be larger than A, B, and C, and D. And therefore, when you're acting in that capacity, something more than those 4 specific things might apply. And that's why I tried to make it open to find additional things where you could be said to be acting in an official capacity to which the ingredients of this code would apply.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you for that. So my issue with having any reference to official capacity in the document is that I don't think you can separate yourself from your position as a politician or as a representative. It's just like if you're a doctor or a lawyer or someone else, somebody does something terrible and it's, Dr. such and such did this, who works at such and such a hospital. we work at the region, we have a responsibility to act accordingly, because everything that we do is scrutinized. And I think a lot of us have experienced a lot of that. So I really don't think that it's possible to separate ourselves from that job. And so my next question to you, Mr. McDermott, is, you know, there's no perfect document. You said that right off the bat almost. That you're not going to find that perfect document. But if we are going to have one of these documents, it has to be practical, and I think it has to be practically applied. And I think that's why we have an integrity commissioner and that's why we have lawyers to interpret law and to do that part of the job. So I think, you know, we may be overthinking this whole process. What I'm thinking is, you know, probably the original document that we got prepared by a professional is probably the best document. All politicians can do at this point is have a pretty good, I think, code of conduct, and then we're going to overthink it, trying to protect scenarios that could possibly happen and mess it up. So we have to be able to trust the document, but also trust the practicality of it. This is not getting everybody into your bedroom. This is sort of how we should react. It's not getting people into your church. What it's doing is saying, when you are doing anything in the public, it's going to be scrutinized, and you have a responsibility to the employer, which is the region of Niagara, to act in such a manner that will not embarrass, will not, you know, disparage, won't cause all of these problems. So I'm disappointed in the document because it's just been sort of torn apart, and for the wrong reasons, or maybe for the right reasons, but it's just going too far. We don't have to go that far. We have to have a good integrity commissioner that we trust and believe that he will do the right thing when time comes to make a judgment. So if I'm on the golf course and somebody smacks me in the leg with a golf club by mistake and I scream out some profanity, I would expect that the integrity commissioner would say, you know, that's not proper language. However, under the circumstances, I don't think this was a problem. But I would remind the counselor to please not swear, you know, when you try not to do that. So I think we have to look at it from that perspective. And I would just ask you, Chair, is there anything that I've said you really disagree with? I'm not asking you to agree with it, but is there if I made a point that's not, you would say, boy, you're off base on that?
What I take,
Chair,
please. What I take from the main thrust of your point, Councillor, is that you can spend an awful lot of time, and I don't want to use the word nitpicking, but picking apart something that has been created by professionals. You know, the test of when you're a professional is when somebody's paying you. And this council has paid a professional to produce a document for your review and consideration. Obviously, at the end of the day, it's the will of council that will govern. But I take your point that it's now a year down the road, and there are still amendments to be made.
Thank you for that. So I can't support a document that has that in there. For me, it doesn't work. I think we're overthinking it. We're picking it apart. We have to look at this from a practical perspective, that we have to have some rules in place, and then we have to enforce them in such a way that, or interpret them in such a way that's fair and honest and above politics. When you start injecting politics into a document that regulates the politicians, there's a conflict in my mind. So, you know, we need an outside body to come in and say, this is how you should do it. And by the way, some of the things in this document will conflict with the documents that I also have to follow at the municipal level, lower municipal level, as a mayor of the city of Welland. This they don't jive. It's not the same. So when I'm saying something, I'm going to get punished by the city of Welland, but I'm okay over here, and vice versa. So I don't think it fits in with almost anybody else's code of conduct.
So Welland's a sanctuary, you said?
It is, it's a great place. That's why you don't have to come down there. We have some problems.
Absolutely, I love
Yeah.
Welland.
So anyway, Chair, I'll wrap it up with that. I can't support a document that has official capacity in it, and I'll get on the list for amendments at some point if you want to mark it down. But my amendment would be to simply remove any reference to official capacity from the entire document.
Councillor Annunziata.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Very concerning comments that Councillor Barrett raised. And I only had one concern, but now I actually have two concerns. So specifically, the comments made by a local reporter, I have contacts at regional government that have been leaking information to me at great risk to themselves. I find that incredibly troubling. I know you mentioned earlier, Mr. Chair, about the ombudsman and the great conversation you had with him earlier. I'm hoping that through that process, that comment could be investigated just a little bit deeper, because that is very troubling, especially in the context of this conversation we're having with code of conduct and confidentiality. The question that arises in my mind is, what's the quid pro quo? What gift or benefit are they now afforded or deriving by supplying confidential information? And I wouldn't even know how an integrity commissioner would adjudicate something like that unless it's formalized in a complaint or there's actual evidence. I find that absolutely incredible. That's more of a comment, Mr. Chair, but I do have a specific question to our guest this evening. Specifically, my concern has always been the lack of fidelity between our policies. So we talked about our expense policy, and I asked staff to bring forward some language with respect to official business. Now, I equate that terminology in the expense policy with official capacity. So, to our guest this evening, is there an opportunity to create fidelity between internal policies amongst councillors, specifically the terminology of official business and the terminology of official capacity?
Mr. McDermott, I think that's a valid question. Official business, official capacity, are they the same, or how do they differ?
Good question. If you're talking about the definition, and I don't even have the copy that it's included in, of business of the region, was that what you were referring to, Councillor?
Correct. And
that just crept up in the last week.
Yeah, for your benefit, I'll actually read.
It's not mine.
So currently, regional business is defined to mean attendance at an event as a representative of Niagara Region to derive a benefit for Niagara Region or to advance the interests of Niagara Region. I asked for a more definitive and, I would say, prescriptive definition to remove the ambiguity, to remove the gray and make it more black and white. And I think Councillor Maves actually made the suggestion that when we do have this conversation with the Integrity Commissioner, and when we do have this conversation under the Code of Conduct, maybe that's the opportunity to really specifically derive some fidelity between those two definitions. The alternative wording for consideration was regional business means any member who acts as a representative of regional council under the authority of the chair or regional council and or is invited to participate in an event, activity, or media program as a direct result of being a member of regional council that directly or indirectly benefits the Niagara region and or promotes the Niagara region and or advances the interests of the Niagara region.
Where are you reading from, sir?
I'm reading from the expense policy that we formalized a few months ago. So when I do go to this particular document, and again, you can kind of create that juxtaposition between the definition in the expense policy and the definition of official capacity. And I just wanted to hear your thoughts. Is it best practice, or would it be beneficial for this council to create that fidelity, to create that congruency in that language?
With your leave, Mr. Chair, I think, Councillor, the way I'm taking what you're saying is that you think that a harmonization should occur between things that are of core definition, such as business of the region, between various policies of the region, code of conduct, and whatever other declarations may be relevant. That is certainly something that's to be desired. I mean, if you, it shouldn't mean one thing in one policy and another thing in another policy. It's a project. It's a significant project, I would think, with all of the policies that this council must have. And it's something that would have to be, I think, referred to staff to see whether or not they could do it. But harmonization per se, who can disagree with that?
I use the word fidelity, but you use the word harmonization between higher pieces of legislation. So for example, the definition of spouse, the definition of parent. Some of these definitions are derived directly from, higher pieces of legislation, and we've adopted them in this piece of legislation. Who would argue with that, correct?
To be fair about it, I focused on those definitions too and scratched my head because I couldn't find the use of the word child or spouse.
Correct.
Anywhere in the draft code. And I'm wondering why we're defining spouse and child if they're not even being referred to. However, that's the way it was done.
So I'm just wondering, Mr. Chair, where's the opportunity now? And I know back when we were talking about crafting the expense policy, Councillor Maves made the suggestion that we actually formalize that definition of official council business when we do have this conversation. So I'm just wondering, where's the opportunity now to create that fidelity, to create that harmonization between those two definitions?
So we started out by talking about a living document, and Mr. McDermott said that it would that this document, in fact, would be a living document that council could adjust from time to time, and I think that is an opportunity for us to look at to improve where we can.
Okay, but as far as enacting an actionable item to come out of this discussion, is it a motion that, or an amendment that I would put forward to create that harmonization of our policies, specifically to those two policy documents?
I think that would be in order.
Then I'll make that, Mr. Chair.
Could you please let me know what that is again?
Basically to adopt the language under the code of conduct, under official capacity, that be extrapolated and applied to councilor's expense policy under official business.
Okay, so in other words, if it's good enough to be in the code of conduct, it should be good enough to be in the expense policy.
Correct.
Or vice versa.
Or vice versa.
Or vice versa. Which way, have I got it backwards?
It's like chasing a rabbit hole.
Either way for me.
They need to be consistent is what you're suggesting.
Well, I like Mr. McDermott's comment about creating that harmonization.
For the benefit of council, that word sticks in my mind. It goes way back when I was actually practicing law. I was retained by the city of Toronto when it was amalgamated to harmonize the wage rates of the 6 constituent municipalities and their employees. That word harmonization went on for like 6 years.
Okay. Yeah, speakers list to the amendment, please. And is there a seconder? Councillor Barrett. So do we have a script for the amendment? So we know what we're, okay. Councillor Grenier and then Councillor Burrows.
Where is the amendment?
I've just asked the clerks, they're just preparing it.
Mr. Chairman, I don't disagree with the intent. I just don't think it's necessary to do that. I think you pass the document and then you have a different resolution of things to harmonize, to be consistent. But our goal is we would make the language in there, official business, and then a reference to the council policy and that we know that we have to do that. I think the idea of holding this up or trying to debate both at the same time is just going to slow us down. I think that the idea is to approve this and understand when we've concluded this debate that we go further through our legislative process and request that these actions be taken. I don't think an amendment now or to the report that we have before us is necessary. I don't think anybody disagrees with the intent. I think that it's, and I don't think it's expense is the only one that, because I have another one that I was going to bring up as well.
So,
that
Councillor, I think
cleared
you're,
up.
just in the essence of time, I think you're correct
Yeah.
in that, in essentially what the amendment suggests is that the two policies be harmonized, in
The definition, not the policies themselves, but the
the
definition
definition of the
within those two
policy be
policies, correct.
harmonized in official capacity. I think it's easy enough for us to get our heads around wanting to do that for consistency's sake. Whether we, I don't think it's necessary that we do it tonight, but I do think it would be a wise move for us to get both policies on the same page.
I appreciate it, Mr. Chair. Just correct. I was going to make a suggestion about another one as well later on, but that's we're going to have this list is going to expand.
Fair enough.
And that's why I was suggesting that why would we do this now rather than sort of create a homework assignment that's a little more complete.
Just to answer the councilor's question, and thank you, Councilor Grenier, for your comments. The only reason I bring this forward now is because on the heels of Councilor Mave's suggestion when we were doing this, he said now would be the time when we discuss this issue to bring that forward. That's why I'm bringing it forward now. It was agreed upon then, and I'm just following up on the will of council at that particular time.
I consider this a motion of, or an amendment of clarification to have both documents speaking the same language, and I don't expect that we're going to make that policy tonight. I expect that we're going to do that moving forward based on the code of conduct should it get approved tonight. Councillor Burrows?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and while I also agree with the concept, if you started by saying the definition of official capacity, what we're talking about is the definition, not the code of conduct and councillor expense. Just move it around a bit. The suggestion from the presenter was that it go to staff to come back harmonized. Yep. That doesn't say that in your thing. If you don't mind that minor change, I can be supportive. It's not going to happen tonight, but we're going to head there.
Yeah, how's this? It's been revised already. The definition of official capacity, the code of conduct, and the councillor. Okay, well, wait a minute. I think we've captured what your intent was, Councillor Burrows.
That is my intent, and I then can be supportive.
Okay, I'm going to call the vote on that. All those in favor?
Chair, one moment, sorry. Before you call the vote on the amendment, can I don't know if it can be considered friendly or not, like Councillor Burrows, but the definition of what official capacity means.
We're not going to include that here. That's not part of what we're trying to do here.
Well, then
we could talk about that, but we're going to talk about it in another. This is simply to make two policies speak the same language.
I understand, but what I'm asking is that we define what it means, not what it includes, subsequent to my previous comments.
When we get back to the code of conduct,
well, actually,
deal with
Chair, if I may, this resolves. I offered to put forward an amendment earlier. I don't have to if the word means is put into this right now. You killed two birds with one stone by addressing it.
I accept it, okay. All right. Fair enough.
It completely changes it. It now makes a decision on what that means. I appreciate where you want to go, but we don't have a definition for that yet in the context of how we're talking right now. So I agree it should be harmonized, but that should be a matter of course, not a matter of an amendment.
Councillor Marshall, let me get clarity on how this would impact the amendment one more time from Councillor Barrett.
That the definition of what official capacity means. I don't want it, what it includes and leave the door open. I want a solid, closed definition.
So what the definition of official capacity means, be harmonized? Sorry?
Take your suggestions, we're gonna move on.
Point of order, Chair.
What's out of order?
Well, I think we're talking about something that's not about what we're talking about right now. We're talking about the code of conduct, and all of a sudden now we're talking about different policies.
Well, we're simply trying to,
I realize that, but I think we should settle the code of conduct issue,
I
and
agree.
then this would come after that.
I agree. You're not far off. Let's get through this.
Sorry, Chair, just consulting with the mover of the motion.
Yeah, so in my estimation, whatever we settle on, whatever language we settle on within the code of conduct
Yes,
definition of official capacity,
yes.
I'm going to assume it's going to be automatically harmonized. So there's no need for that particular point of it right now.
Okay.
The intent being whatever we settle on as a council,
Yep,
will be applied.
okay.
And I'm
fine,
comfortable with
thanks.
that.
All right, so I'm going to call the vote on what's the amendment before you. All those in favor? Pardon me? Recorded has been requested.
The vote is open.
And that carries, thank you.
And that's all the questions I had.
Thank you very
Mr. Chair,
much.
the
Moving
presenter.
on to the next speaker. Main motion. Is it Councilor Marshall? Councilor Marshall?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be brief, and I essentially agree with everything Councilor Campion has remarked on. I'm from a different era. We didn't need a code of conduct. Things got done dynamically in council all the time. They weren't always pretty, but it always got done. It was a healthy way to do it. I think this actually can create more harm than good. Right now, I think we're trying to legalize common sense. And it's a tough job to do at the best of times. Now we're trying to refine the legislation of common sense. We don't need that. We need a basic outline of a document. And if something is so egregious that we're all offended, I heard the 2/3 remark, and I agree with it. If something really is wrong in our community, I don't want all these things to be defined. We can come and discuss it and have remedy. Our ability to do something about a behavioral situation, like legally now, we can only do two things, and it may be one or the other, not both, is so modest, I don't think it's worthy of this dialogue. You know, the only thing would be money. You can't stop them from being here. We can't stop them from being offensive.
Mm-hmm.
What's the sense in that? So I don't even know if I'm going to support this at all tonight. It just doesn't belong here. Generally, you can't legislate common sense, and but we do have some remedy, and I'd like to see that happen. So I guess I'll make that determination as time goes on.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Mays?
Thank you, Chair. I can't pledge to be short, as Councilor Marshall did. I don't like this. I'm going to tell you where I come from, Mr. McDermott, and I'll ask a question at some point in time. I voted against this when it was brought back about 1.5 years ago completely. And the main reason why is the intent is to sterilize democratic debate. And I knew it would come to that, and it has already. I knew, and I said at the time, that the code of conduct would be used as a political weapon, and it is. And I'm sure you're seeing a flood of code of conduct complaints by the same people over and over and over, and it's because it's being used as a political weapon. And it didn't even take long. It took several months, and it's already gone into that. So to me, this when you get into this and you get all these details in 10 and 13 pages, and you're neutering debate, you're neutering animation, and you're neutering colorful comment. In fact, it's a 50-50 chance you get a code of conduct complaint because I just used the word neuter 3 times. Someone will will take offense to that.
I already have a call about that outside.
There you go. I just find this, there was someone at one point in time, someone made a presentation here, and a counselor disagreed with them and argued or was somewhat forceful in the way they made their point or asked their questions of the person. And someone filed a code of conduct complaint that the counselor was too strong in his questioning. And that bothered me to no end, because you shouldn't be asked to be the referee on how hard someone can question somebody else. I sat in provincial legislature with Peter Cormos for 1995 to 2003. 75% of what Peter said in the legislature would run afoul of this code of conduct. Minimum, probably more. But many people in this room loved Peter when he did what he did in the legislature. I didn't. I was the victim of a lot of it. But that was politics. That's what democracy is. You're supposed to be colorful. You're supposed to be entertaining. You're supposed to say things in a way that stick in people's minds. And this is just trying to put a standard and handcuffs on us, so I can't express myself, right? I don't want to, the line in here, and I'm going to keep using Peter, because Peter would offend me like crazy in the legislature when we were practicing politics, and then we'd go out for a beer or something together later on, and get along perfectly well, and we're friends and we're gentlemen. And he didn't do anything racial or to offend anybody in that capacity, but we didn't neuter his ability to be colorful. We didn't sterilize him, and thank goodness we didn't do that. So I don't know how you and other integrity commissioners are going to be able to sit back and say, you know, this person, genteel person watching at home, may have been a little offended about that, but it's part of the process that someone gets animated, that someone gets creative, and someone gets a little colorful, that someone gets a little annoyed and irritated when they're making a point. Because that's what democracy is, and that's what democracy should be. And it's served us pretty good. And we're trying to stop it. And I don't know how you're going to find your way into that gray matter. If you got any comment or explanation you can make.
Councillor, with your leave, Mr. Chair, the view that you are expressing is covering both sides of the tail, as it were, and that's something that this council has to determine as to which direction it goes in. You're moving from a document that was 3 1/2 pages of large type to a document that is 9 pages long with very small type. And that's the difference, I think, in what you're saying. The amount of regimentation that is spelled out detracts from the flexibility that existed in the more broad-based document.
Yeah, I didn't like the document. I didn't like the first document. In the previous council, we had 2 years of codes of conduct brought before us, and we kept shooting those all down. And every time they brought it back, it added 2 more pages. There's something in here, Chair, and the Integrity Commissioner that annoys me. The region's staff serve council and work for the region as a body corporate under the direction of the CAO. Inquiries.
Page and number.
6.2, the role of staff. The region staff, inquiries of staff or members should be directed to the CAO or the appropriate senior staff as directed by the CAO. We discussed this in the last iteration of council many times, and we all agreed that none of us do that. If I have an issue with the Commissioner of Public Works, I call the Commissioner of Public Works. If I have a problem with public health, I call Dr. Yeager. And everybody does. Because it doesn't make any sense to file everything through Mike Trojan. That's when we debated it last time. It doesn't make sense for all 30 of us to go through Carmen every time we want to ask them about a sidewalk or a road. Okay, but that's in here. I don't like that. But more importantly, in order to get to the level of commissioner, you've got to have a lot of experience. You've been around the block many times. You've probably been a commissioner in a municipality. We use the term in here that we shouldn't criticize them. I don't want to denigrate them. That's wrong. I understand that. I don't want to be disrespectful and so on and so forth. But if I can't criticize the Public Works Department because they've legitimately have screwed something up, 75% of my constituents want me to jump on people at the region because they don't like the way a road is kept, or the stoplights are too long and don't work, or the speed limit is wrong, or we're spending too much money on this, or we're spending too much money on that. They want me to be somewhat critical. The only person we can be critical of a certain department through is really through the commissioner. But I'm not allowed to do that in this.
Councillor?
Yeah?
I'll direct you to the sentence that talks about the CAO or to the appropriate senior staff as directed by the CAO.
As directed by the CAO, which is exactly the problem. Thank you for reiterating my point. Anyhow, these are issues with it. I'm going to vote for this because I'm afraid if I don't vote for this and we keep going, it's just going to get worse and worse and worse. I want to address official capacity. You have to realize that 13 people in this room that are councillors are full-time. 12 are mayors and 1 is the chair. So Mayor Campion is on the clock all the time. I get that. But the rest of us, 18 of us, are part-time. We are expected to have other jobs. So when we go to our other jobs, 40 hours a week, our bosses don't expect us to be regional councillors. They expect us to be their employees. So you can't impose the code of conduct of the region on me when I'm an employee of somebody else. It's not fair. It's not reasonable. Councillor Height, if he's selling a phone in his previous capacity to someone for TELUS, and he gets in an argument with the guy wants a better rate, and he says buzz off. The guy can theoretically, if you don't have official capacity, file a complaint that he told me to buzz off. So, I mean, we can sit here all night and come up with all kinds of examples. And I don't want to do that because we've had several and enough. But official capacity has to be there. And I think we should have left the word means in. I'm sorry, but I read that and I'm like, that about covers it if it says means. If it says includes, why have a definition of it all? Because now if it just includes, it can include just about anything. So I like means being back in there.
Don't.
Okay, Councillor Maves,
that's it, Chair. I'm
Marshall.
at my 10 minutes. I've done my speech, but I don't even want to vote for this. I voted against it in the past. I'm going to vote for it tonight because every time we don't finalize it, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and I can say less and less and less as a councillor and as a representative of my constituents, and I'm tired of everyone continually eating away at what I can say and do on behalf of my constituents.
Well, unlike Councillor Marshall, unlike your statement that you were going to be just like Councillor Marshall, you weren't. You took 10 minutes.
That wasn't my statement. You didn't listen close enough.
Councillor Beatty.
You know, just by deciding to call the heads the coin as opposed to the tails isn't making sense to me. I hear the comment that was just made by Councillor Mays about being on the job, etc. But bottom line is the public sees us in the role. If any one of us gets pulled over by RIDE during this holiday season and our name appears in the paper, I trust you. Anyone who knows you will put regional councillor in front of that name. That particular process, by the way, I have a problem with because the consequence of naming the people in the paper isn't the same for everybody. It's not the same if you're a guy working in a factory compared to being the minister of the local church or whatever the case might be. That notwithstanding. Bottom line is here, we're looking at a situation right now, we're saying only an official duty. Well, most of the complaints that we've had are questionable as whether it was official or not because their use of equipment, use of telephone, use of computer, twittering, etc. Now, where do you break the line as to, well, was that in Or was that out of the game? You can't. We had an employee here who was terminated because of the use of a computer during the course of their duties, et cetera. So just by trying to say that it's inbound or out of bound, in my view, is not going to help in the long run. And we've got a situation where, unfortunately, there are many valid, and I appreciate the very valid points. Councillor Tim has earlier said in terms of that about having, and Councillor Patty as well, having a code of, a moral code of your own, and you hold yourself accountable to that in public. I believe that. But is that the venue of the 31 people around this table? No, it's not. Situation is, I don't think we've had the right policy. I don't know what the right policy is, but it's not going to be the one that's going to be put on the floor here tonight. Thank you.
Councillor Grenier?
Thank you. Before my comments, since we're blending this together with questions, I'm going to ask a couple of quick questions, if you don't mind, Mr. Chair. The first, through you to the presenter, is in the complaints process, where it says refusal.
Item number?
6.
6.
Refusal to conduct investigation. I'm having some confusion about how this is applied. Because I understand what all these mean, but I get the sense that sometimes it's not being applied as judiciously as it should be to some of the complaints that come forward, leading to the 2-hour conversation that we've had here.
I'm sorry, could I get the section that you're referring to again?
6, it's in the complaint, Appendix B, Code of Conduct.
Number 6?
Yeah, number 6.
Appendix 1.
Appendix 1?
Part B.
Yeah.
6.
No, this is the...
refusal to conduct investigation.
Yeah.
If the integrity commissioner is satisfied. Go ahead, Mr. McDermott. Yeah. No.
Go ahead. I'm having a hard time.
The way I hear you're concerned, Councillor, is that the person who is in charge of considering and directing these complaints that come in should rigorously and judiciously and fairly apply the constraints that are upon him in the context of the complaint itself, and it should be done at an early stage, with the result that the angst of going through an investigation on something that is not even within his jurisdiction, or as I talked earlier, something that he, even at the end of the day, I would not have done more than has already been done, I think reflects upon my attitude towards that.
Yeah, but okay, so how can we be assured? Because I think that a lot of what I've heard over the past 2 hours really starts at this beginning point of the process. And if there is sufficient latitude for the integrity commissioner to review a complaint and dismiss it based on the items or the parameters that are listed in the appendix.
Subparagraph D is pretty broad in that respect.
Yeah.
So it's a matter of how the integrity commissioner interprets any given fact situation as to whether or not it falls within those prohibitions.
Yeah, okay, I'm trying to get this sold tonight, so tell me how we can, how would we be assured that that's actually something that's going to be applied?
Well, the way that you're going to be assured is if you hire me for life, which I won't accept, by the way. But I think where this may come clearer to members of council is when we get to an appropriate point and a report is made to council about the activities of the investigator in relation to the complaints that are filed during the course of that period of time.
Thank you. Councillor?
The other thing I was going to suggest, in the code of conduct, there was the whole section on gifts. If I could make a suggestion to you, Mr. Chair, and to the CAO, I believe that we should actually have a line item in the code of conduct to reference the council and senior staff gift policy. And to be consistent, that's one of the other things that we should harmonize with the code of conduct, in that to be more specific about those scenarios. And I think that we should look at that in there. I think the description's fine, but I think there should be one more line item referencing the gift policy. Now, back to the, if I can, through you, Mr. Chair, after refusal to conduct an investigation, the other thing that's been sort of a concern to me is that when these integrity commissioner complaints, as they go to the investigation level, I'm trying to understand how and why members of council would need their own solicitors, and how would we be running up the clock that way for the way that we have based on integrity commissioner complaints rather than civil litigation. And I want someone to help me connect the dots on that.
Mr. McDermott?
Sorry, I don't understand the question.
Well, I didn't understand.
Are you saying that when a complaint is lodged against a councillor, that he will retain independent legal counsel?
That's what's been happening.
Which is paid for by the region?
Yeah. Okay, so you're just as perplexed as I am. Okay, thank you. That actually answers my question. Okay, Mr. Chairman, I'm having a hard time with this conversation. Actually, I found it a little bit heartbreaking throughout the past 2 hours. You know, our jobs, as they are here, you know, we are to provide legislative direction, oversight, and debate on the vision of the corporation. And the purpose of a code of conduct is that it's an extension of the oath to provide validity to the public that we are signing on to a prescribed sort of things of behavior that we would adhere to. Now, with the modernization of municipal and Bill 68, it's actually mandated so that through our procedural bylaw, we can engage an integrity commissioner. The purpose of that process was the old part of the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act was very difficult for both councillors and the public to access. The purpose of this exercise was to be held to account for particularly egregious behavior and to make it an extra level of scrutiny that we would be able to be able to live with, and the public would have access to. Our problem is that we live in a particularly toxic environment here in Niagara right now, and you know, to a certain extent, some of this has been weaponized, but tonight, we're trying to parse words to keep that from happening, and it's ridiculous. It can't happen. You're always a counselor, right? Councillor Beatty's correct. It's an honorary title. It comes with being validated from the public. It's part of your identity. You signed up for that. The concept of official capacity to restrict when you're actually a counselor, not a the counselor is impossible. And the idea to suggest that somehow that's going to make it easier or for us to inoculate ourselves against any complaints is absurd. So, you know, the idea of trying to do that, rather than take the big picture document that should have been before us to say, this is the code of conduct we're signing on, it helps us consistent, there's a cascading effect in how these things work together, so that there is the level of scrutiny that has access to the public, and it doesn't bankrupt us or those bringing a complaint to be involved. That was the purpose of this. I sat in front of the government for 2.5 years as part of the MOU table to fight for this, to get that happening, and to change the access to the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act to make it less like the sarcastic way I described it as a New Hampshire license plate, live free or die. You know, either you're exonerated and you get to keep your seat, or if you're convicted, you have to resign. There was no in between. The idea of a penalty of 30 or 60, 90 days for an inadvertent or a nominal breach of act or something egregiously bad behaviors, we've seen to have certain things removed from your compensation or be suspended from council, I think is a legitimate compromise to what was there before. So for us to keep trying to parse the words to make it fit into a scenario we're living in here in Niagara today, I think is a mistake. It is a wrong sort of compromising of our preciously finite legislative time. And I think that we should be looking at a way to take the professional document that was proposed, some nominal edits to make it work better with some of our other documents. And I actually think it's also a mistake to not have in parallel, at least so that they are done in subsequent meetings to each other, the new procedural bylaw, so that this actually has a function. It's going to pass the code of conduct that's going to be referenced in a procedural bylaw that hasn't been passed yet. So I think that we need to actually address that issue as well moving forward. I'm not in favor of this the way it is now. I was happy with the one we had in July, and I think that this is a mistake to pass this tonight. And I think that we need to step back off the get off the ledge a little bit here and gain perspective on what our jobs are, and perhaps try to reconnect with the public about the responsibility of holding us to account in our behavior.
Thanks, Councillor. You exceeded your 10 minutes now.
You know, like really? Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Edgar?
Thank you, Chair. Couple of questions to the Integrity Commissioner. Sorry. Under Appendix B, Code of Conduct, Tracked Changes version, I'm sort of like Councillor Campion here is, and I'm really confused by all of these different. So please bear with me if I have to go searching for something, but for now, I've got this one right.
Okay.
The one that I'm interested in is 8.7. And it says the Integrity Commissioner shall retain all records related to the complaint and investigation for a period of 1 year.
Yep.
The Integrity Commissioner may provide copies of certain records in confidence to regional administrative staff who are required to ensure that any such records are securely and confidentially retained.
Okay.
I'm not really, Mr. Chair, I'm not really sure what that means, and I was wondering if somebody could provide me with an example.
Mr. McDermott?
Well, the records and the confidentiality that is ascribed to the records is probably pretty clear from the processes that are outlined in here. All that section is dealing with is the obligation to retain and where to retain them. So I read that section as meaning that the Integrity Commission is required to keep these records on hand for a period of a year, but he can give them to a member of the staff of the region who will find a place to put them in a secure location. That's the way I read it, rather than having them sitting around my basement so the grandkids can get at them.
That's fair. That's fair. Now, the next one is penalties for non-compliance with the Code of Conduct, and it says 16.1C. So it's under 16.1, it says where council receives a report from the Integrity Commissioner that there has been a violation of the Code of Conduct by a member, council may take the following actions. A reprimand. B, a suspension of remuneration paid to the member in respect of his or her services as a member for a period up to 90 days, and shall require the approval of at least 2/3 of council present, or receive for information. And I don't know, I don't understand that, because if a person has been, if there has been a violation of the Code of Conduct, then I don't think that that penalty should just be received for information. So I'm wondering why that's in there?
No idea.
Oh.
I didn't put it in there.
Oh, okay.
That was an addition. That was an addition through the process, the early part of the process, probably out of the PBRC.
Okay.
But yeah, you know, the first two, the A and the B, really deal with what's in the statute.
Exactly.
And you've tacked on or councillor, whoever did it, has tacked on a requirement that it requires 2/3 to suspend pay.
And I don't have
That's not in the statute, by the way.
The 2/3 is
Yeah.
not in the statute? So what is in the statute? Just a simple majority?
Council may decide to suspend the
But it
pay of up to 90 days, period.
Oh,
But
okay.
in this process, and the contributions that were made by everyone
I see.
over the course of the past year, that's where it ended up. But yeah, I agree. I don't know why receive for information is in there.
Okay, now, discrimination and harassment.
Point number?
It's number 10, and 10.1 and 10.2. I'm just wondering why those highlighted words were struck out. I don't suppose that was you that struck it out, Mr. Integrity Commissioner. It was someone else, and
You're
I'm
talking,
not.
no, that was before my time.
I'm not sure. Could somebody, Mr. Chair, answer? I don't understand why they were struck out.
I think we need to catch up where you are.
Oh, discrimination and harassment. I believe it's Appendix A.
Appendix A.
Code of Conduct.
Part B?
Tracked changes version.
I've got advice provided by member.
It's page 7.
Okay.
10.0.
Code of conduct. Okay, we're back in the code of conduct?
Yes.
Okay. You got it. Discrimination. And your question one more time, please?
I'm wondering, Mr. Chair, under 10.1 and 10.2, why was without abuse, bullying, or intimidation, why was that crossed out? And members shall not use indecent, abusive, or insulting words, phrases, or expressions toward any member of the public, another member, or staff. And I'm wondering why that was crossed out.
Mr. McDermott, is that something that you would recommend be included or not?
Frankly, as we've discussed before, this has been an evolving process. So when you see these changes made, oftentimes I'm not in a position to explain why they were made.
I understand.
If I look at 10.2, it seems to me that what's being left in there is inclusive of what was stricken out, and probably larger than that. Members shall not make an expression in any manner that is discriminatory. On the other hand, you could also say that that's just a repetition of the Human Rights Code of Ontario.
Okay.
It doesn't talk about abusive, insulting, indecent words. So you're right. It, looked at through the telescope, that's probably a narrowing of what was there before.
Mr. Chair, I find myself in agreement with Councillor Campion on a lot of this. And I think that, first of all, as soon as we try to change hats, I think we run into difficulty. And by changing hats, I mean, when am I a councillor and when I'm not a councillor? And as other people, I think Councillor Grenier has said, or someone else said, is that when people see me, I'm a councillor. They know that, and it doesn't matter what I'm doing at the time, Mr. Chair. So as long as that is part of this code of conduct, I'm not going to be able to support it. And I also believe that there's also other items in here as well that I think are really vague. I think, Mr. Chair, that we're almost trying to get too fine in what we're looking at. I mean, I think it's just almost overdone, Mr. Chair, and unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to support this version at this time. Thank you.
I don't disagree with what you're saying, Councillor. We do have a code of conduct that's in place today. So whether we accept this or drop this today, we still do have a code of conduct in place, not as if we're going to be without one. we're trying to make improvements to what we have, and that's the goal of tonight, and talk through the items one at a time. And I appreciate council's initiative and tolerance to do that. So it's taken us a long time, over a year now, so I appreciate all the work that we've been able to put in. Councillor Height?
Yes, I was just asked to be brief. My apologies coming late. One question, the Integrity Commissioner. So this isn't your code of conduct. You're just here to present what the committee has done, and you haven't edited the code of conduct. Is that what I'm understanding?
I have, as I outlined earlier, Councillor, I was asked to and did review the code of conduct that you have before you at a point in time through, as it was evolving through the process, where a lot of work and money had already been spent on the front end. I was asked to review it and make comments. I did. Those comments included recommendations that certain things be removed and included recommendations that certain things be added.
Okay. So
virtually all of which have occurred.
Through you to the Integrity Commissioner, did you suggest that they remove the 2/3? Because if we want to be harmonizing, shouldn't we harmonize with what the province have dictated by the rules of the suspension, 90 days? And it doesn't state anything about 2/3 of council.
That's right, but it's silent. The statute is silent, right? But somewhere along the line, the PBRT or whoever made a decision that to impose that penalty, council should put a restriction on themselves that it cannot be done without a 2/3 majority vote.
So
that's what you're being asked to vote on.
Okay, are you suggesting the committee that we had has that?
Somebody did it.
Someone did, not you though?
No.
Okay, can I have that voted on separately? Is that what we're doing tonight?
Well,
As
if you've
an
got an
issue?
amendment,
Can I make an amendment to remove that? Because it was added by the committee. I'm in disagreement with that, that I'm seeing in bold.
okay, so you need to walk back through where you are for the clerk's benefit so that they can understand what you're asking. Pardon me?
Hold on, I'll give you the number.
Which document are you in first of all? Appendix or the code?
I believe it's in the code.
16.1 subsection B.
16.1 section B. The committee added that it needs 2/3 of council present. And that's not what the province has as.
The province is silent.
Is silent on it, and I believe we should be a majority, and that's it. As the province is silent, why are we adding more restrictions on it?
So Councillor, are you asking for it to be deleted? Or are you asking for it to be simple majority? What are you asking for?
Deleted, so it becomes a simple majority.
Okay. All right, so an amendment has been put on the floor. Is there a seconder for that amendment? Seconded by Councillor Barrick. Discussion, well, we're simply deleting, if you turn to 16.1B, correct?
Correct.
Deleting 2/3, which leaves a simple majority, I would assume. So, okay, so we're voting on deleting the 2/3. Okay, 1 sec. We're talking about 16.1. That's it. Okay, please open the vote when you're ready. Yes.
I guess we can't speak to the amendment, or can't get on the list to speak to this amendment.
Join the amendment.
So could we have the amendment, the clause that is being amended on the screen? And I just want to speak to a couple of the comments that were suggested. The legislation, as the commissioner said, is silent. So then council can decide, as we decide some things by 2/3, and we decide some things by simple majority.
No, that's not what's on the floor, Councillor. What's on the floor is to remove this particular suspension of remuneration requires 2/3 or requires simple majority.
So that's exactly what is on the floor.
Yeah, which
is
one do you
whether we
choose?
decide this by, the question is, do we decide to suspend somebody's pay by 2/3?
Yep.
Or we decide it by simple majority?
Right.
So my point is that it's not, legislation leaves us free to do it either way. And my concern is that that is a significant enough decision that it requires 2/3.
That's right.
And that was the question about why it was in there, because I think that kind of decision does require 2/3. I've spoken to the amendment.
Okay, let's vote.
Sure.
The vote is open.
We never got it on the screen, I see.
So it's yes, amend.
What? No, it's no, don't amend. It says no, don't
Sorry.
strike it. Can we get it on the screen?
Have I told you that I'm dyslexic?
No, sorry.
My apologies. You are absolutely right.
Okay, and since I
So it
still
fails.
have 4 minutes and 30 seconds left, I
Carry
came
on.
in when Councillor Campion was speaking about official capacity. Is he going to make an amendment to remove that from this document? I'm not sure what, I came in at the end. Well, then I will make the amendment that the document removes official capacity, because I feel like other councillors, I just left a function and 2 different people asked me about what's going on in the region, and I was there as a function, invited as a party that I said I was going to. I wasn't there as a councillor, but
Point of
guess
order,
what?
Chair.
I'm a councillor all the time.
Excuse me, what is out of order?
We just passed an amendment, and in fairness to Councillor Haight, I'm not sure if he was in attendance at the time, this evening, about the official capacity definition being the same in 2 places.
Yes.
So we just had a motion saying that definition the same in both places,
Be harmonized in both places, correct.
and now at the very same evening to pass another amendment to say, yeah, but take it out. I mean, it's out of order.
We did pass a motion to say that official capacity was going to be harmonized between our expense policy and our code of conduct. You're absolutely right, Councillor.
Well, then I can just vote totally against this whole document and be done with it and go back to our old code of conduct and hope everyone acts like they should and act like adults and do what you think's right. And if the constituents don't like what we've done, guess what? When you run again, hopefully they'll throw us all out.
Chair, I make a motion to call the question.
Okay. Motion to call the question has been requested. So I'm going to call the question on calling the question. Okay, just to be clear, and we're going to use the buttons. So is everybody ready to call the question? I want to vote on calling the question. Calling the question. Go ahead.
The vote is open.
Are you ready to call the question? Yes, everybody wants to call the question. The question is the motion that's on the floor. If we can please go back to the original motion on the floor, that is the question. Absolutely. I'm just glad there's 17 councillors here. Okay. Please open the vote when you're ready.
The vote is open.
The answer is 10 no, 7 yes. So we, with that, I'll turn to the clerk to make sure I'm right, revert back to our existing code of conduct. Okay? So we do have, our existing code of conduct is in place. Council has decided not to change the code as it is, was recommended by the IC, but to stick with the existing code that we have. So, do we have to confirm the meeting? We have a special council meeting scheduled for immediately. No, we have done council business. We have done council business, so we have a council meeting scheduled for now. It's one confirming bylaw. It should only take a couple of minutes. If we could please get through that. Thank you very much, Mr. McDermott, for making the trip down.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. May I withdraw with your permission?
You can withdraw and take Friday off because we will not be having a meeting Friday.
I think I've done a tremendous job in promoting this new code
I think you've done a tremendous job too. Okay. Let's go, guys. We got our meeting before we lose everybody. Oh, quick, guys.
Okay, look, we don't need a special meeting because
We
there's
do
no
need a special.
business.
Yes, we did do business. We do need a special meeting. Okay, I'm going to call this special council meeting to order. Where's the script? That's right. So in this particular meeting, there is no other business than to confirm the bylaw of the meeting that we've just had. So I'll take a motion. Councillor Burrows, Councillor Grenier. I'll call the question. All in favor?
Whoa.
Whoa, what?
Mr. Chair, if you don't confirm and you don't have this meeting tonight, then at least our council of the whole then could be referred to the next council meeting held in September where you have a full legislative decision. And I know it means maybe having to go through part of it, but at least you have then that wonderful piece called second thoughts. And you're just, by doing this tonight, you're cutting off that opportunity. And with all due respect, now, I know you'd like to get all this out of off our table, but just as a matter of interest, I think we need to have that discussion. Or I brought up the discussion. You can call the vote if you'd like and see whether we pass it or not.
I'll second the motion.
What's council, second motion to defer the business to the next council meeting?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I hear a motion to defer the business that we've talked about to the next council meeting. Recorded vote has been requested.
Chair, if I may, just for clarity, are you talking about the minutes of this meeting?
Bylaws, the minutes, the bylaws, everything that we've done tonight, refer it to the next council meeting.
Okay, thank you.
We're in session, we have a meeting underway right now. So to say that we can't do that. Okay, please open the vote.
This is to defer it?
Yeah. Question?
Through you to the clerk.
Hold the vote.
So, yeah.
You gotta start again.
Again, I'm continue to be confused. So I thought we were in the special council meeting when we were having that discussion.
No,
So
we were in a code of conduct
general
meeting.
Meeting? Yeah, I came in late myself.
Yeah,
so.
we adjourned that
Okay.
special code of conduct meeting.
That's my question.
Okay, so for council's information, did you want to add to the deferral that a simple majority gets it back on the table? Or do we want 2/3?
No, we get a deferral, and now we're arguing what a deferral is.
Deferral? No, it's a deferral.
You can't amend it.
You can't.
Speak to it. You have to
Okay. We're deferring.
Nice try, though.
We are deferring all the business from tonight to the next meeting. Do we want to bring that back with a simple majority? Do we want to bring it back with 2/3?
Are you amending the deferral?
Okay. Open the vote.
All committees report to council. This committee's business is going to be sent to council.
This is a council meeting.
No, but how we can finalize it. That's not what council.
Yes, he did. I was pretty clear on that. We're going to refer it to next council meeting. Please get ready to vote before we lose quorum.
The vote is open.
If the deferral loses, we'll deal with it tonight. refer it to next council meeting is no. So can I have a motion to accept the bylaws of Councillor Height, Councillor Volpatti. Again, I'm sure the recorded vote's going to be asked for. The question is the confirming bylaws for the meeting that we just had. We're not going to refer them. We're simply going. Yeah. Yep. Open the vote.
The vote is open.
You watch this one be a no too. If this one's a no, I don't know what to do. I gotta ask the clerk. It's a yes. Okay. All right. I'm going to consider this meeting of council adjourned. Thank you. Merry Christmas.